Bienvenidas y bienvenidos a este encuentro entre entidades de fiscalización.
Welcome to this meeting between Latin American SAIs and public and private institutions. This is organized by the OLACEFS and organized by the Alliance for Integrity, and this is for the prevention of corruption, transparency, and citizens' engagement, and for the program of strengthening environmental external control. I would like to give you some technical advice for those who would like to listen to the debate either in English or Spanish. There's an option that it's known as simultaneous translation, and you can use this in order to listen to the simultaneous translation. If you're using Mac or Linux, you can find this option in a menu with the 3 dots that you see in your screen. If you would like to ask any questions, we invite you to use the chat box or the Q&A section that you will see in Zoom screen. If we don't get the chance to answer to all your questions during this meeting, these questions will be forwarded to the panel members, and we will answer to those questions via the chat. I would like to welcome the Director of Alliance for Integrity, who will be giving us some opening remarks. Minister Araez, the Chairman, Jorge Bermúdez Soto, Comptroller General of Chile, Maria Valentina Zárate Montalvo, Comptroller General, Acting Comptroller General of Ecuador, Mr. Mauricio López González, CEO of the Global Agreement of Red Colombia, distinguished authorities, dear colleagues of OLACEFS and from GIZ, dear participants, I would like to welcome you all to this meeting between SAIs and public and private institutions. The whole idea is to talk about integrity and transparency. We know that corruption is a significant hurdle for the sustainable development, and we also know that one single player is not able to solve this issue. That's why it's important for all players of this society to work together on this matter. One tool to work on this is the public and private dialogue, which aims at building trust between those two sectors and also to lay the foundations for a joint assessment of the issues that we face in order to identify policies and any institutional reforms that could contribute in order to have a better setting for the sustainable development. The SAIs play a key role on bringing the awareness about corruption risk and also to foster the good governance in order to strengthen a culture around integrity that goes beyond the public sector and encompasses other sectors as well. They could be an important bridge to have dialogue, to have information exchange among main players. So debates can start it that can be effective so we can fight corruption and also to implement concrete solutions so we can foster this culture based on integrity. Oftentimes, public and private sector, it's still based on the relation between the public sector and the SAIs. So that's why we want to congratulate GIZ for such an important role as part of this public and private sector dialogue, and it's in the forefront of this area in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is a platform in order to foster this kind of dialogue between the public and private sector. For those who are not familiar with us, just a brief comment because further or later on, you will know what we are doing at Alliance for Integrity. We're funded by the German Corporation and has been implemented by the GIZ. This has been fostered by the private sector, and we provide support to companies who are committed to fight against corruption in a collective fashion, in a very practical way. Alliance for Integrity offers a platform for public and private sectors and also for the civil society in order to foster learning among peers globally and also to join the efforts needed to create a world of businesses which can be characterized by integrity. The members of OLACEFS have been involved in many activities together with us. And I would like to just offer some examples of the activities that we've conducted with the Comptroller General's office in Chile and in Paraguay. As for Chile, for instance, we organized together with the German Chamber once a year. Usually we hold an international symposium for fighting corruption. Another example is what we do with the Comptroller Office in Paraguay. We work with them to implement some training oriented to small and medium enterprises who would like to work on this fight against corruption. We're running other activities and you will see these during this session. And obviously we are not the single project of GIZ, which works with the OLACEFS. We have other projects here with us. In GIZ, we're usually exchanging information so we can have a cooperation which can be more strategic and sustainable when it comes with what we do with our counterparts, for instance, with the OLACEFS. That's why we work with the regional project for strengthening the anti-corruption control. Sorry, I correct myself, strengthening of external control on the environmental field, which will have a new stage or a new phase focus on anti-corruption. Also, we work on the unilateral project, which is known as Ecuador Sincero. The OLACEFS cooperation is done within a framework of Memorandum of Understanding that we just signed, which is mainly focused on working on digital tools and on communication as well. Just to provide an example, with OLACEFS, we've conducted a campaign already. This is a global campaign for integrity within the context of the pandemic. We wanted to draw attention about the need to work with integrity and to call all players to be committed about this topic. This has been a very successful campaign, I will dare to say, with 50 promoters globally. We've been working with these 50 promoters, and they've put together a video in which they show a complicated situation. We also have some testimonies of known or renowned people and also leaders of different sectors of the society in order to promote the message of integrity and transparency. Well, going back to the subject matter of today, I would like to summarize the objectives of this meeting, which is to share with the SAIs the tools that we do have in Alliance for Integrity in order to foster the public and private dialogue towards integrity. And also, on the other hand, we would like to share with the private sector the tools that OLACEFS has on this area, and also to talk about best practices that are being developed within the region. So I invite you all for this fruitful session in which we can see new things that we can do as part of this inspiring collaboration between the Latin American SAIs, the private and public sector. Thank you very much. Thanks, Susani. So moving on with our agenda for today, I'm pleased to offer the floor to Leandro Buendia Valdivia, who is an analyst of the Cooperation unit from the Comptroller General's Office of Chile and the Executive Secretariat of OLACEFS, who is here to share with us the main tools that OLACEFS has for integrity. Thank you, Juan Sebastián. Good morning, everyone. In OLACEFS, we're very happy to co-organize this event, an event in which we will be able to share different initiatives and best practices around cooperation among SAIs and the private sector. Just to give you some introduction for those who are not familiarized with what we do, the OLACEFS, it's an international entity composed by the SAIs of 22 countries in the region. On top of that, we do have 29 SAIs, which are associated members. These are SAIs, subnational ones, which are local or regional ones. As part of the main objectives of OLACEF, we need to create or build capacities to train professionals and institutions who are members of our institution. Also, we foster the exchange of experiences and best practices in the region in terms of oversighting. We're focusing mainly on the governance control, the implementation of best practices and international standards, and the fight against corruption.
A great part of the initiatives that we have developed at OLACEF have focused on the role that SAIs have so that we can meet the agenda towards 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, as we have mentioned before, on February the 3rd this year, OLACEF and the Alliance for Integrity have signed an MOU so that we could promote a joint implementation and deployment so that we can increase capacity in the region so that these controls could be as effective and efficient as possible as we look for promoting integrity, accountability in the public sector, and other topics. It's important to highlight that this MOU also allows us to strengthen the capacity of SAIs so that we can be efficient, efficacious, and transparent, considering the agenda towards 2030 for SDGs, especially SDG number 16 and SDG 17, which is basically the alliance so that we can meet these goals. Considering the framework of this initiative and the MOU, along with the Alliance for Integrity folks, we have made a research March last year so that we could assess innovative and interesting initiatives that have to do with the SAI's role and collaboration with the private sector. We have seen great initiatives, and I would like to highlight 4 of them. We could delve into those later on. First, guidelines so that vendors can be hired during the COVID-19 emergency situation. This is an initiative along with the Transparency International body in Brazil. The Comptroller General's Office from Colombia joined the UN Global Compact, which is quite an interesting initiative too. The Comptroller General's Office in Ecuador has created a reporting system for citizens in partnership with the private sector, and the Comptroller General's Office in Chile has created a very interesting initiative, which is the anti-corruption one. They're going to give us more details about that. Without further ado, I would like to welcome you all to this session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Leandro. We'll now hand the floor over to Carolina Echevarria, Regional Manager in the Alliance for Integrity for Latin America. She's going to tell us about some tools that we can use to help integrity issues. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Leandro. We've been working together over the past months so that we could deploy the MOU under this topic. I would like to give you some tools so that everyone in the room today can understand what we do in the Alliance for Integrity and how we work along with the OLACEFS. Any employee from SAIs or from private sector institutions can make use of those tools so that we can deepen the way we work and integrate the public and private sector when it comes to anti-corruption. Suzanne has touched on that already. She talked about the Alliance for Integrity. She said this is a global initiative. It's all about cooperation between the public, private sectors, and civil society so that we can all focus on integrity in the economic sector. There are four main pillars to our work. The first one has to do with raising awareness. We want to start the discussion and tell people why anti-corruption efforts are important and what the main problems to it are. We signed an agreement with the OLACEFS so that we could create this awareness-raising campaign. Integrity dilemmas are especially important during times of crisis. In the chat box, you can now see the link to our website. You can find many testimonials and the content of this campaign. The second pillar to our work at the Alliance for Integrity has to do with coming up with a dialogue between the public and the private sectors. This is what we're doing right now. We want to learn from each other and strengthen our cooperation and relationship of trust between the public and private sectors. Because of that, we can create specific tools because we manage to build trust between these two players. We got active participation of the Controller General's Office from Paraguay, and we could create an article on ethical dilemmas during times of crisis. You can find the link in the chat box. When it comes to public accounts, or when it comes to the interface between public and private sectors and the consequences of these relations, this is what we tried to talk about in this article, especially when it comes to the consequences of such decisions. We also consider peer learning processes. We want to learn from each other. It's not only about talking about best practices, but also talking about initiatives that haven't worked, so that we can understand what works, what doesn't, and why some initiatives work well in one country and does not work that well in another one. This is what OLACEFS is all about. We want to learn from each other. We can do that at a global level because the initiative has been implemented in over 15 countries all around the globe. We've got a strong footprint in Latin America. 9 out of these 15 countries are located in this region. Finally, capacity building. This is also a very important pillar to OLACEFS. We want to create sessions so that we can help institutions implement programs so that corruption can be prevented. There's an iconic case that happened in Chile along with the Anti-Corruption Alliance and the Controller's Office of the country. We could adapt our initiative that was originally created for the private sector to public-owned companies. For that, we created integrity capacity building sessions. I also want to mention two important elements. These are key factors on which we want to keep on working along with the OLACEFS. The first one has to do with gender issues. At OLACEFS, we have a specific committee to handle that, and the Alliance for Integrity, over the past 2 years, has been working on this topic. We want to better understand the challenges and the advantages of having a gender perspective to our integrity programs, especially when it comes to coming up with strategies to fight corruption. In Colombia and in Mexico, we're working so we can develop tools that can help these institutions implement this different gender perspective when they create their anti-corruption strategies. Digitization is also important. Now, more than ever, this is a key factor so that we can think of these integrity factors and anti-corruption efforts. At the Alliance for Integrity, we want to create an integrity app so that we can assess integrity programs as compared to international benchmark. So these are some other tools that we can use. We have just added a new feature to the app. And because of this feature, you can run an initial risk assessment to your organization and assess which tools would be needed to create an integrity program. In Brazil, along with the Court of Audit of the Union of Brazil, we have developed a tool so that we can assess integrity programs inside public institutions. We are also creating tools so that we can improve the standard that we have to the app. We believe these are just the first steps that we're taking along with the OLACEFS, as long as the Controller General's Office of Chile, Paraguay, and Ecuador. We believe that in the future, we can work in cooperation, especially considering SAIs and the private sector. We also want to delve into innovative topics such as gender and integrity and digitization efforts. That's how we believe we can create integrated strategies so that we can fight corruption effectively because of digitization efforts. We also want to have a broader take on the topic and include specific groups and their own needs. That's it for me. Thank you very much. Over to you, Sebastian. Thank you very much, Carolina. We're now going to kickstart our main panel. We're going to talk about best practices of cooperation between SAIs and the private sector. We would like to invite the members of the panel to turn on their webcams so that we can see them during the debate. Participants can ask questions using the chat box or using the Q&A feature in the Zoom app. It is my honor to present the head of the bilateral program to prevent corruption, transparency, and citizenship participation from the technical committee. Gela, over to you. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. We're going to talk about best practices of cooperation between SAIs and the private sector. Greetings from Quito. SAIs must help governments from their countries to increase their performance, increase transparency, and make sure accountability happens. We also want to fight corruption and use resources to benefit the population. That's what in Lima and Mexico we're trying to do. This is also connected to the development and meeting the SDGs. SAIs connect different sectors, and that includes companies. For example, when it comes to hiring public vendors, tenders, and This is also important for private stakeholders so that public resources can be used in a transparent fashion. The question is, what are the best practices that we can find in the SAIs and as they are connected to the private sector? To talk about that, we have a distinguished panel of speakers. From Brasilia, Ana Arraes, President of the Court of Audit of the Union of Brazil. She has a law degree from the Catholic University. She was also a congressperson in the past. She'll be talking about her experiences and challenges in the Brazilian Court of Audit when it comes to the private sector so that we can better manage the public procurement processes. We also have Mr. Jorge Bermudez Soto, General Controller of the Republic of Chile and Executive Secretary of the OLACEFS. Mr. Bermudez is a lawyer. He has a PhD in law and community law from the Autónoma University of Madrid. And he also has a degree from Heidelberg University. He'll be talking about his experience as he leads these efforts in Chile. From Bogota, we've got Mauricio Lopez Gonzalez, Executive Director of the Global Compact from the Colombian Network. Mr. Lopez is an engineer and he has a degree from the Catholic University from Jarabe. He's also the VP of the National Association of Companies for Public Services and Communications in Colombia. Mr. Lopez will be talking about his efforts in the Global Compact along with the Controller General's Office from Bogota. And from Quito, we have Ms. Valentina Zarate, Controller from the General Controller's Office from the state of Ecuador. She has a degree and master's degree in law by the University of Salamanca, and she's an expert in law by the Simón Bolívar University from Ecuador. Mr. Zarate will talk about her perspective regarding reports and the presence of individuals and companies in tender processes. This is such a distinguished panel of speakers, so let's begin. We're going to start with a general question. So please, I would like to invite Ms. Arraes, Bermudez, Lopez, and Zarate to talk a little bit about their perspective. We'll give you each 2 minutes. Why is it important to have a good cooperation between OLACEFS and this private sector when it comes to preventing and fighting corruption?
We would like to offer the floor to Mrs. Arraes.
Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this event. I believe that the role of the SAIs and private sector can lead to synergies in both spheres by exchanging experiences, disseminating good practices and lessons learned, and in addition to act as a catalyst to promote the ranks of the proper use of tools that guarantee integrity and accountability and compliance, has a beneficial effect of disseminating a culture that is against corruption.
Muchísimas gracias, señora Arraes.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Arraes. Now, what are the best practices? What is the importance of best practices? And for that, we offer the floor to share his view. We offer the floor to Ms. Jorge Bermudez. Thank you, Fiorella. I would like to greet all my colleagues from this panel. For this question that you're asking, I would like to take a step back. And in order to take that step back, I would like to say, why is it that SAIs play such an important role in this fight against corruption? If we look at legal mandate of many of our SAIs in our region, we may not find a specific standard that states that the Controller General's Office plays a specific role in the fight against corruption. Historically, SAIs have been in charge of the control of public spending, and we never thought about if, as part of this legal mandate, there was an illegal event taking place. Whenever we spend illegally the funds for benefiting just a specific group, we're talking about bribery and other illegal acts. In order to answer your question, I would like to go back to what the General Assembly of the UN said last week. In this declaration, in point number 5, states that SAIs play a very important role in the fight against corruption and that the SAIs should be independent. And the recommendation in this regard within the legal framework of each of the countries should be followed and adopted as corrective measures. So the role of the SAIs is a role that has to include the fight against corruption. Now, we need to think about what's the impact that we may have and how we can have a relationship with the private sector or with the private companies. So, Fiorella, we have to remember the big impact that the government may place in the market. Let's consider only public works or public procurement. And if we do that, we see the relationship between the private and public sector and how this accounts for a very important percentage of the GDP. So we're talking about a lot of public resources that have been transferred to the private sector to carry out or to work on a public good. So the way in which we can face this risk is such that we need to create partnerships so we can reach the SDG goals. And as part of this CDGs, we do have CDG number 16 that talks about sound institutions to reach peace. And as part of those objectives, we need to fight any way of corruption. And this is what I'm going to talk about based on the experience that we had in our anti-corruption partnership. Thank you very much, Jorge. Now we offer the floor to Mauricio, and the question is the same one. Why is it that the articulation and the jointly effort between the SAIs and the private sector is so important? Thank you, Fiorella. Good morning, everyone. A global agreement is an initiative of the UN that works on 4 main topics: foster human rights, fostering work standards for a decent job, environmental protection, and fight against corruption. This is the mandate that has been there for 21 years, and it was even greater when we stated the Sustainable Agenda 2030 and with the 17 SDGs. And as my previous colleague said, objective number 16, peace and sound institutions and justice, talks about the action of a state and some institutions that can be respectful institutions that are respected as well. That being said, the institution as a word doesn't talk only about the government. Institutionality refers to also any other component of the society. And among those components, companies are of utmost importance on the relation that they have among them, the relation they have with the government, and obviously the relationship they have with the society. So when we talk about something that is purely governmental, when we say that it's something that only it's a matter of citizens reporting things, we're actually making a wrong statement. There's a close relationship, no doubt, on what the company does and what we do together with the citizens and with the government as well, and with the public institutions which are in charge of taking care of things as important as the fight against corruption. So this is our vision, and that's why you always have to think about what the company does and how this is linked with the official institutionality and what they do with the SAIs, because we all need to work together on the construction of a society full of virtues, and we need to have the mechanisms needed based on trust so we can move forward, so we can have sound institutions which are respected. We need to have peace, justice, and an ongoing fight against corruption. So this is our contribution as part of this first vision from our Colombian network, Pacto Global. Thank you, Fiorella. Thanks, Mauricio, for your remarks. And now we offer the floor to Mrs. Zarate from Ecuador. What do you think that this partnership is so important? Good morning, dear panelists and dear colleagues. In order to answer this question, I have to say that corruption practices may be seen as advantages for private sector. However, corruption deteriorates the free market actions and doesn't allow new investments and creates insecurity and destroys the ethics in businesses. Keeping into account what I just said, corruption affects not only the governments, but also affects institutions and citizens. So all sectors in a country may be harmed by corruption. Therefore, in order to curb corruption, we have to work together with the citizens, with the private sector, and with the governments. We all need to be focused on a common goal, which is to promote a setting of integrity in the public and private sector. Private sector has become a stakeholder in the prevention and combat of corruption, playing a key role on this fight against corruption as part of the measures that the private sector could do in order to promote ethics and reduce corruption. We do have the implementation of report channels to report these illegal actions, internal controls, standing orders to create best practices code, among other measures. Is needed the creation of clear commitments from the private sector, specifically the private sector that has contracts with the state-owned companies. And this has to be based on a culture, based on principles, values, and guidelines which respect the legal framework. In this sense, the SAIs become key players on the fight against corruption, and it's needed to foster integrity, not only inside the SAIs, but outside as well, so it can become an icon in order to prevent corruption. And this is a clear example of the commitment of the institution to have an internal control and appropriate so we can comply with the institutional objectives, and that can be done in an effective way, always thinking about the social interest based on the experience of the SAIs and based on social responsibility of the private sector. We need to foster cooperation among SAIs and private sector. For that, we need to position the SAIs as a reference point, as promoters of integrity. We need to foster the construction of sound strategies to prevent corruption. For instance, technology usage, the transparency in private sector, mechanisms to report, methodologies for risk assessment, and the improvement on the analysis on procurement processes. Something else that we've been working on is to relate the training programs on audits to private sector, offering capabilities and knowledge about the audit standards. Thank you very much, Valentina, for your remarks. You've been talking about the role that SAIs play on the corruption fight. Jorge talked about that. Also, synergies that we need to have in order to build capacities. As for the institutional commitment that Mauricio mentioned, and also the institutional work that has to be done, so we do have different perspectives. Valentina stressed everything that has to do with competitiveness, ethics in the businesses, and also the citizens' engagement and the private sector engagement as well, and the different tools that the SAIs have available in order to facilitate this process. Now, moving to another topic, we are going to hear each of our distinguished speakers, and they will talk about different topics. Each of them will have 5 minutes to talk about each of the topics. You will have 2 minutes at the end of each of the interventions to offer the floor to any of the panel members to make any comments or to add any remarks about the talk. So I would like to invite Ana Reyes. The crisis provoked by COVID, which is something that we're still experiencing today, has forced us to face many challenges, especially when it comes to public procurement. What's the role that the Court of Audit of Brazil has played creating tools in order to prevent corruption and to curb corruption, specifically when it comes to public procurement?
Ladies and gentlemen, Brazil, as a assignee of the 2030 agenda from the UN, has as objectives the substantial reduction of bribery and corruption in all its forms. In Brazil, the fighting corruption and fraud depends on the cooperation of different agencies, each in their own sphere. We are a part of this network as a very important actor, and we have identified in its strategic plan for 2019 to 2025 an increase of public integrity in fighting fraud and corruption as some of the national challenges. In addition, the efficiency and efficacy in fighting corruption are guidelines for external controls that should guide the actions of TCU in the 2021 to 2023 plan. According to international transparency data, Brazil is ranked among 180 countries at 94% of the corruption perception index, which is the main global indicator. Since 1995, this index assesses countries and territories that are ranked and has scores from 0 when the country is seen as highly corrupt to 100 when it's seen as very with 100% integrity. This is seen by decision makers in public and private sectors to assess risks and to plan their actions. From the beginning of the assessment in 2012, Brazil has shown evidence of low values of these indicators, staying at unsatisfactory levels. To have an idea, in 2020, there was a level below the average of the BRICS countries, which was 39, when Caribbean and Latin America are at around 41 and global 43, being even more distant from the average of other countries at 54 or 64 from CD. With this information from the Association of Scientific Fraud Examiners in its national report from 2014, corruption schemes were presented with high risks in all departments, especially in public procurement areas, which was 70% of the cases. Public procurement requires knowledge, certified knowledge with a specialized personnel with procurement laws, logistics, and several solutions to hire, such as to hire services and works for engineering and information technology, which are not easily available at times. And sometimes the asymmetry of information between private organizations and public agencies may lead to inappropriate results, such as overpricing and specific suppliers that are erroneously interpreted as inappropriate behavior from the buyers. In Brazil, this has even a greater significance if we consider that through all the assessments by TCU from 2012 to 2015, the results in general considered deficiencies in the governance systems and inappropriate management from most of the assessed organizations, which really reduces the capacity of producing positive results for society. In addition to exposing us to relevant risks, the scenario is very concerning, but we should not give up. When the TCU defined improvement of public administration to benefit society through external control, has employed all efforts in the sense to mitigate the asymmetry of information between suppliers and buyers, with works that might lead to the knowledge of public managers to adopt the best practices for governance and to overcome this disparity. The closeness between the public and private sector are not only important when planning hiring or planning purchases, but it's a central topic to fight fraud and corruption. In this pandemic scenario, throughout the world, we are all looking for the same supplies and same equipment, which impacts several ways and the execution of public policies and hirings that support them. This gains an even greater dimension to provide efficiency in allocating resources, to provide information to managers to conduct public policies. The TCU instituted back in 2021, Cooperación. It's a special program to fight the COVID crisis. The objectives are to support managers and society with guidance activities, partnerships, and dialogues to follow up the measures that are developed by the federal government in response to the pandemic. The TCU has also approved a special plan to monitor the measures adopted by the ministry to assess the fight of the damage caused by the crisis with external control to allow or enable greater interaction between the TCU and those responsible for the COVID-19 response measures, and with analysis on other topics as well. Under my leadership, we have also put in practice the support program for municipality or accountability program, where we intend to facilitate access via the TCU portal to public managers and provide information on the specific key points for public management, such as public purchases, execution of public policies, and accountability, grouped in under 4 fundamental pillars. Capacity building related to the training and capacity building of mayors and other public managers, promotion of events, technicians to guide debates on topics related to the municipality management, documents and specific document guides for municipal managers, and the establishment of partnerships to strengthen the initiatives that are similar between different institutions in the 3 spheres of our federation, trying to combine efforts to systematize and convey content in a very clear and direct and straightforward way. We want to enable the application of public resources for equipment and supply purchases in response to the pandemic by the Ministry of Health. And this was assessed looking at different contracts in all of the different municipalities throughout the country. During the follow-up of these purchases, we have identified several frailties in procurement processes that have been assessed, such as excessive detailing and an insufficient description, lack of justification for for different types of payment, and products that are similar to those specified without any justification, and demonstration of the needs of those products purchased, anticipated payments without the appropriate warranties, selection of suppliers without the proper qualifications to deliver the hired product. These are factors that may lead to overpricing, overbilling, and other inappropriate behaviors in response to these healthcare crises. All of the responses from the public sector specifically focused on governance and in improvements, the strategies for procurement strategies have been successive objectives for the assessment of the TCU. And the TCU has also tried to become closer to public managers and local networks to disseminate good management practices, and for public purchases recently launched in partnership with the controllership of the government to fight corruption. The TCU Mais Cidades program aims to strengthen structures against corruption for those public institutions registered around the country to reduce levels of fraud and corruption in Brazil to those levels similar to developed countries, using online and continuous service platforms. Managers will have the opportunity to assess their institution, trying to find the more vulnerable points previously. And from this diagnosis, they can develop specific action plans with appropriate responses and solutions to their needs. The program still offers guidance, training, and partnership models with other private and public agencies and companies to implement mechanisms to fight corruption in public purchases and hirings as its main aspects. So public managers should prevent corruption, attacking their main sources and causes, still keeping an eye on the regular application of public resources from the SAIs. So it's a notorious effort from TCU to fight corruption. TCU also recognizes the importance of contributing to improve government of purchases, to manage ethics in preventive control, and also in the detection, correction, and continuous monitoring of risks that are known in public purchases, and thus contributing to building a more participative society that is more aware of their rights, and managers that are very much aligned to provide quality services and a dignified life for all those in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Ms. Araiz. This was a very interesting speech. So we're going to move on to the next speaker now. Each of the speakers have 5 minutes for their remarks, but we'll now give you from 5 to 7 minutes. If you want to make use of them or not, that's up to you. With that, I wanted to talk about collective lawsuits. This is a very important action to fight corruption. The Controller General's office in Chile has done great work in terms of connecting that to their country so that they can fight corruption according to the UN guidelines. Jorge, here's our question. What challenges have you faced as you started working in the Alliance, and what were the positive aspects that you have seen after you started working with the Chilean SAI?
Thank you very much. I promise I will use the time you have allocated to me. Just want to share with you that in Chile, we do have an initiative that we've called the Alliance for Anti-Corruption that we started back in 2012. It was called Alianza UNCA in the past. And now we decided to change the name, and now we call it Alliance for Corruption, which is actually a partnership between different players. And I'm going to go deeper on that in order to aim this goal, which is fight against corruption. Well, the main challenge when you have a partner, at the beginning, our partner was the United Nations Development Program. It's our partner, and through their representation in Chile, this program is, so to speak, the co-organizer with the Controller General Office to move forward with this initiative. Then we needed to call many other players, and when we start an initiative like this, we run the risk of this becoming only a partnership of public institutions. And sometimes when we are the ones calling for this, it's easier to call the public institutions, as in Brazil, the Controller General Office is part of other entities which fight against corruption. For instance, the Council of State, we do have the Committee for Transparency and other entities. What was important was to ensure the involvement or engagement of the private sector, and also to ensure the engagement of civil society. And the only recipe for this to happen is to lead this initiative, to invite them so they understand that it's very valuable, their engagement. Once the partnership starts, the main challenge is to sustain the partnership throughout the time, because at the beginning, everyone starts with a lot of excitement. At the beginning, everyone is really excited about it, but somehow you take the picture of the kickoff and somehow the excitement goes down. So somehow we need to have a leader for that. And the Comptroller General's Office is leading this together with the United Nations in order to keep this partnership alive. As part of the Alliance framework, we've conducted many activities, and I can share with you some of them. A seminar or symposiums have been held, and we have kept not only the partnership, but we have other partners as well. This is part of Alliance for Integrity activities and other things that we've done within Chile. We also need to make difficult decisions. As I said, maybe at the beginning, many people are involved and maybe want to be in this picture because they want to be seen as a champion against corruption. But then when it comes to taking action, they may not be here. So if you're not going to take part of this, well, please leave the partnership. And obviously, this is a difficult decision that we've made. And we have a partnership of people who are fully committed on the fight against corruption. We have people from the private sector, from the civil society, and from the public sector as well. So this is a partnership that it's been sustainable throughout the time. As for the main achievements that I can point out as a result of this partnership, well, first of all, we've stressed, or we've highlighted that the fight against corruption, it's not only that it's under the responsibility of public sector, we need to have all of those who can have an impact on this public sector, private sector, and obviously civil society needs to be involved. Civil society needs to take part of this because they are the representatives of these bad or good public services. So we're able to show the importance of this. It's been 10 years since the partnership started, and we will complete 10 years next year. And we have been able to show some of the best practices that came out of these committees that have been organized as part of our activities. We're talking about 30 institutions in the partnership. We've put together proposals that we filed to the Congress, to the government for legislation changes that have become bills in order to improve the anti-corruption legislation in our country. Some of these initiatives have become this kind of ongoing improvement. In the partnership, we developed this initiative to lay the foundations for public ethical code, and this is part of the outcomes of our work in our partnership. Anything that has to do with training and dissemination of what we're doing to show that this partnership is being effective. It really shows how important it is to fight corruption. And that's all I could share with you for now. Fiorella, thanks, Georgie. Really interesting, your talk. I would like to invite the other participants and speakers to maybe share some experiences about this Alliance for Corruption, that it's been here for 10 years. I don't know if anyone would like to add anything to what Jorge just said. Well, if you allow me, may I take the floor? Of course. The floor is yours, Mauricio. Well, first of all, I would like to pick up on your comment to share with you what we're doing in Colombia. Is that okay, Fiorella? Yes. I don't know if we can maybe give you the floor and to also relate your initiative with what the Comptroller General Office is doing in Bogota. So you could talk about this relationship and how you have been able to improve the relation between the private and public sector, and also how you've been able to work on the public resources management. I think that what Jorge said is really important. The partnership lays the foundation for all this effort. Partnership among who? It's not a partnership with myself, because otherwise I will be talking about the same things that I have to do based on my legal mandate. You have to think that other may help you to have better reference points for you to improve your management and to trust on the public entities so you can work hand in hand in a more active way. If we add to that the action with government entities subject to control, we can keep on adding on an active way. So the key word here is partnership. Well, going back to Colombia, the control mapping is very similar to that of other countries. We do have the Comptroller General's office in Colombia at the national level and sometimes at the territory level as well. And we also have the public ministry that in Colombia is known as Procuraduría, which doesn't deal with criminal things, but rather administrative topics. On top of that, we do have the governmental office of the Secretariat towards Transparency. And there we do have all other entities which work on this goal, which is part of the network, a network that we do have not only in Colombia, but globally. It's the biggest corporate initiative worldwide that works on topics like human rights, work standards, fight against corruption, always aiming at reaching the SDGs. So the message of Mr. Bermudez is a really strong one, to be in a partnership so you can learn from other, to discuss with other ones. And we need to think about the citizens as well and how they can be involved. What is it that we've done in Pacto Global in Colombia? First of all, the network per se, it's a public and private partnership because the network invites the private sector, mainly also the civil society players, the academia, and the public institutions as well. We don't have many public institutions in the partnership, but we've worked with them. Regional Comptroller General's offices, we have 3 of them who are part of our Pacto Global, and I would like to highlight the one in Bogota. We understand the mission and we recognize that to be partners, to be part of this Pacto Global partnership could allow for these partnerships to create a greater dynamism. We've noticed, as Mr. Bermudez said, that we've conducted many trainings, and sometimes we may think that anti-corruption topics, and not only anti-corruption, but sustainability topics are widely known, and you realize that that's not the truth. These are long-lasting procedures. If you want to change the culture of a society, you need to start training the grandparents, and for that you need 2 generations to have that training. But this is something that we have to do, because if we don't make progress, we always think about what we could have done and we never did, or we just only take the first image, but we're not able to actually take action and do any follow-up. And that's why I would like to highlight what we've been doing in Comptroller General's office in Bogota. We've been working on an ongoing basis on this network, and something this year happened which has been great. Mr. Castro, Comptroller General Office of Bogota, said, I want all my people to be on a stage in which we can raise awareness. We want people to be informed and trained. So my mission, the mission of the Comptroller General's office, which is to use in a better way public resources and to convey messages and to provide thoughts about what the territorial entity is doing within its jurisdiction, could help as an articulator among public policies, in this case, sustainable related, in which anti-corruption fight plays an important role, together with the mission of the controlling entity. So what's going to happen when audits are conducted, when research is carried out, or when judgment of value are done, when that happens, we want all these to be linked to the SDGs and to be related to global agreement. Why is that, Fiorella? The narrative is of utmost importance. SDGs are the world's narrative. It's not that we're talking about emojis, we're talking about narrative, a narrative for. Not a narrative to tell the story, but a narrative for a purpose, a narrative to move forward, to learn from others. And I think that this best practice of Pacto Global together with the Comptroller General's office, I'm not talking about only a group, I'm talking about all employees being involved in different stages of training. And as a result of that, we know that this best practice is something that we need to show as a learning practice of mutual learning from an entity like us, an entity like the Comptroller General's office. And we have to think about how is it that we can have a better articulation regarding the mission so we can build partnerships. But not only that, so territories with its governors and those that are being governed, we can comply with the 2030 agenda for sustainability. In other words, based on our main purpose, which is to have a virtuous society. So that's why the magical word is partnership, as Mr. Bermudez said. This is something that we've been working on for 10 years.
Buenas prácticas en contra de la corrupción.
We can find best practices to find corruption in companies. Why? Because we're now all connected to this greater purpose. Of course, we'll find obstacles. Societies are not perfect. People will always question the work that we do. We can work as best as possible. People will always question our work, but we have to keep on making progress considering this main principle. Nobody's perfect, but we have to take small steps, proposing actions so that we can truly fight corruption. We must have a zero tolerance policy. Move forward with these purposes, considering controllership organisms or accounts controls. That's how we can achieve our higher purpose. So first, we need alliances and partnerships. Aside from that, everyone needs to know what their mission is. Everyone needs to do their share. Companies have to do their part. Societies have to do their share. Governments have to do their share. Controller General's offices have to do their share. And the partnerships can be a mediator to these actions so that we can move forward all together. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Dr. Bermudez and Ana also mentioned that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mauricio. That was a very interesting remark. Collective lawsuits such as the Alliance in the General Controller's Office of Chile. Well, you also mentioned sustainability issues and the achievements that we have seen because of the efforts that have been made. Each stakeholder needs to do their share so that we can create this social tissue and fabric so that we can fight corruption. The Court of Audit has assessed different problems. We also need to have support to a responsible management activity. This is especially important for public accounts. With that, we would like to hand the floor over to the Controller General's Office of Ecuador. Maria Valentina Zarate Montalvo can tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in your country, how you have managed to create a reporting network, and what your best practices are. Thank you. Corruption creates lack of trust. Therefore, we have to recover this trust. Institutions have a major challenge ahead. To overcome those challenges, we need policies that have concrete measures that foster integrity and that prevent risks posed by corruption. To prevent corruption, we need efforts from citizens, from the private sector and from the government. We all have to work towards the same purpose. And as you mentioned before, every time corruption impacts the private sector, their participation facing the problem becomes increasingly significant and relevant. Because of that, we have to involve the private sector to every single practice we have if we are to prevent acts of corruption. And that is why over the past years, social and business responsibility has been incorporated to the commitment companies have made to fight corruption. They have implemented good governance initiatives and they have fought unlawful practices. And therefore, the private sector can foster corruption. Bribe may be offered if they are to obtain a specific goal. That is why we need the private sector to be committed. They have to be involved in all activities from the SAIs, since we share a common concern regarding corruption. We have to analyze it, and we have to find ways to fight it. That includes different aspects, such as the exchange of experiences and best practices in between those sectors, increasing, therefore, the citizens' participation. In our particular case, the Controller's General Office, based on the concept of public integrity that allow us to have social, political, state, private, and collective goals at stake, and according to the national norm, we have implemented since 2009 the initiative called Citizen Claims or Citizen Reports. We want to receive these reports from different citizens and from institutions or private institutions so that they can add to the state control that we have in place. This program has allowed citizens to be involved and the private sector to be more involved in state issues, particularly when it comes to public administration. This program has become a benchmark since we cater people with information on unlawful acts that have happened, especially acts that have originated in state institutions. These actions may reveal by action or omission on public servants or third parties administration that it was not efficient, unlawful, or illegal. Additionally, this type of program is aimed at promoting the increase of trust and credibility for SAIs, and also between society and different institutions. We also believe that the role of the private sector has to be increasingly relevant. The General Controller's Office in 2019 has actively participated along with different citizens and the private sector reports could be sent through different tools. On a national level, we have people to receive those reports. We got the 1-800 Ethicals call hotline, institutional emails, and electronic forms so that people could send their reports and claims to be administratively investigated by the General Controller's Office of the state. We have received 1,807 reports on a national level, out of which 1,102 were reports sent by individuals and 614 were sent by companies. In 2020, we have received around 902 reports, out of which 622 came from individuals and 153 from legal entities. After having analyzed the reports that were sent and assessing that they meet the pre-established requirements for the presentation, reception, and transfer of reports to the General Controller's Office of the state, these reports were sent to control units and provincial directives so that they could be assessed according to their execution plans, preliminary assessment, or other control initiatives. In those reports, when there was evidence of issues that were not part of the General Controller's Office role, we have given users support so that they could present this report to the public or private institution. If those who reported these claims say that there are reports to be sent to other institutions, we could create coordinated approaches so that we could therefore cater a better service to these people. That is what they expect. Thank you very much, Valentina. Thank you for sharing this important initiative with us. State and social controls are very important, as well as other tools that can be used by companies. For the sake of time, unfortunately, we won't be able to open for questions. But if you have any question, you can send them in writing in the chat box and we can forward them to our speakers. We now want to give our speakers 1 minute and 1 minute only so that they can pose their final remarks. For those attendees that want to work with SAIs and private institutions, what should they do? We have many attendees that are part of this event, but that are also part of the private sector and want to work in articulation with SAIs. So please, your brief comments on that. What are the main pieces of advice you can give our attendees? Anna, over to you.
Empresas responsáveis e na vanguarda dos negócios.
Companies that are responsible and in the vanguard of business are increasingly seeking to combine their activities to the ESG indicator, environment, social, and government. In the governance pillar, we have the management practices connected to the fight of corruption and compliance. We want to promote wide transparency between the companies before public entities with internal controls that might allow traceability of their actions and collaborate with preventive and corrective actions promoted by the SAIs. It is also the role of these organizations to promote ethics and integrity between their employees and business partners, fostering an anti-corruption culture, and thus contributing to a political and and commercial environment that with greater integrity for the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana. Jorge, what would be your advice so that we could better integrate SAIs and the private sector? Thank you, Fiorella. I'm not sure this would be a recommendation. I hope these comments may be a guideline for you, but I wouldn't call this advice or recommendation. First and foremost, we have to build trust. My colleague from Ecuador mentioned that as well. And if we are to build trust, we have to think of the facts. In the Chilean General Controller's Office, if we have a reporting channel, we have to get back to the people who raised those claims somehow. If the person reports something, we have to get back to this person. This has to be a live effort. So first, we should show people what we want to do by making use of our facts, our concrete initiatives. And this starts with our own behavior. Secondly, it's important to set the tone. I liked what Ana Luisa, the president of the Court of Audit of Brazil, mentioned. We need to have a strategic plan in place that is valid both for public and private institutions. We have to have a formal statement to fight corruption. If we do not clearly state something, people just take it for granted. People may think that's obvious, but oftentimes it's not. That's what Mauricio mentioned. If we don't make a clear statement, if we don't educate people, and if we don't build capacity, people may just forget about it. Thirdly, I wanted to mention that the tools we have to fight corruption have to be constantly adapted. What worked some time ago may not work anymore. That's what happened to the procurement process in Chile. These systems have to evolve. If we have a code of ethics in the municipal sector, we need to have integrity and compliance efforts for private companies as well. That is why we want to create this anti-corruption alliance. So this would be my final remarks. This would be my recommendations based on my experience. And I believe this has helped us fight corruption. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
¿Qué recomendación? O en todo caso, como bien planteaba, buena
Okay,
práctica.
Mauricio, the same question goes to you. Best practices that could be included and that could be part of your recommendation. Well, first of all, we need to understand that this is a collective or jointly effort, and we need to think about ongoing improvement. There's always room for improvement. It's not that everything is perfect. If we think that way, we will fail, no doubt about it, and we will be very frustrated. So the second word will be partnership with trust, based on trust. And on top of that, we need to think about knowledge. We have to put these three words together. And if we do that, we can move forward strongly. Also, communication, to communicate best practices. In Pacto Global, we are sharing best practices on an ongoing basis. It's like when you are in a beauty contest, when you present a candidate who won the beauty contest, people may think, well, that was not the most beautiful lady. Maybe not for everyone. The winner is the most beautiful one. So this is a process in which we need to keep on showing what we do. And as I said, we cannot put apart or set apart public and private sector. I think that we all need to do our share and to work together so we can reach our goal of having a virtuous society. In Colombia, in the Colombian network Pacto Global for companies, we created the compliance officers network, and it's been very successful. We started with 15, now we have more than 120 companies within the network working together towards best practices, and this is something that we could do in other places as well. Thank you, Mauricio. Now we offer the floor to Mrs. Zarate, some piece of advice that you could offer. Thanks, Fiorella. I think that what's important is to understand that integrity, or foster integrity, is something that it's important for the governance. It's a very important factor in order to prevent corruption, not only in the private, but also in the public sector. So we need to have cooperation between private sector and the SAIs. We need to keep in mind their expertise in everything that has to do with best practices in order to foster integrity within the public institutions. On top of that, SAIs should help to recognize private sector as players that have to be involved in the fight against corruption. They're not only the victims, and that's why they need to develop mechanisms to control and to prevent any illegal acts that have relationship with corruption. There's also an understanding of the social responsibility or corporate social responsibility in everything that has to do with corruption fight. Furthermore, the SAI should create appropriate mechanisms to promote reporting these kind of corruption acts from the individuals, ensuring the protection of those who report these cases, and to not to disclose the names of those who are filing these complaints. These reports should help to apply the internal control measurements of SAIs. Thank you very much, everyone, and just dear greetings from Quito. Thank you, Valentina. Trust, partnership, communication, knowledge, collective building, institutionality, inclusivity, social responsibility, corporate responsibility, compliance, corporate compliance, integrity, governance. So those are the words that we can kind of highlight from this session. I would like to thank all those who join us from Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Brazil. Thank you very much, all the attendees.
Muchísimas gracias, Fiorella.
Thank you very much, Fiorella, for being such a great moderator. We would like to also thank all the panel members for their great interventions. There's no doubt that dialogue, cooperations are key tools in order to foster integrity and transparency in the institutions. Just for final thoughts, I would like to offer the floor to Edwin Ramirez Gutierrez, who is the Director for strengthening the external control on environment field. Thank you, Sebastián and the OLACEFS for accepting the invitation. Well, as it was said here, all organizations need to think about how to face this challenge, as Susana and others said. We need to have a comprehensive approach. We need to include the private, public sector, and the society. As the General Assembly of the UN has recognized the SAIs as key players, so we can ensure the appropriate usage of public resources and also to ensure transparency and integrity, which are key components of a good governance. We also heard about the recognition that has been done to the role of the SAIs in the fight against corruption. This has been a really fruitful session. We have been able to get to know the tools and the scopes of Alliance for Integrity and some of the best practices of OLACEFS in different things that they do at the national level to contribute to fostering integrity. As we said, based on the interventions of Ana Reis from Brazil, from Jorge Bermúdez, the Comptroller General's Office of Chile, from Valentina Zarate, Comptroller General's Office of Ecuador, and Mauricio López, who is the CEO of Pacto Global Colombia Network. They talked about the importance of the dialogue and cooperation of SAIs with the private sector and with the civil society. German cooperation through the GIZ has helping us to contribute to good governance. SAIs are great partners. We see the support of this entity to implement the Alliance for Integrity program. And last month, there's another project to foster the external control for prevention of corruption. So dear colleagues from OLACEFS, participants and representatives of private sector, we will keep working together. We will be partners in crime, so to speak, to work together with the OLACEFS, with their structure, so we can contribute to the consolidation of the organizations and to also support you in everything that you do in regards of anti-corruption, speaking with the society and always willing to explore the new opportunities to cooperate with the private sector, open to improve and to learn from each other and to curb such an important topic as corruption. Greetings from Brasilia, and I wish you a good afternoon. Thank you very much for your words, Erwin. Just to wrap up, I would like to introduce Nelson Jack Chalta, who is the chairman of OLACEFS, General Controller Office, Controller General of Peru, who will provide some remarks. Thank you very much. Just would like to congratulate you for such excellent presentations and for such a fruitful session, this meeting between the SAIs and the public and private institutions within the framework for cooperation as a tool for integrity and transparency. I would like to greet our chairman of the Court of Audit of Brazil, Ana Lucia Raes. I would like to greet our Comptroller General Office from Chile, Mr. Bermudez, who is the Executive Secretariat, our Acting Comptroller General Office, Maria Valentina Zarate. I would like to greet Susan Friedrich, Director of Alliance for Integrity. And I would also like to greet Mauricio Lopez, who I haven't been able to meet in person, but I'm sure we will have the chance to do so. Who is the Director of Pacto Global Red Colombia. And I would like to greet Edwin Ramirez, who is the Director of the Regional Project for Strengthening the External Control of the environmental field. And also, I would like to greet Fiorella Mayoate. Well, as I said before, for us it's a pleasure to take part of such an important session like this one here. I've always believed, as many of you, and as it's been said today, that corruption, it's not a problem of the government. It's not a problem that only has to be responsible of the government. It's a problem of the society as well. So only the fight against corruption could be effective if society as a whole is involved, if the control ecosystem works well. Control ecosystem in which SAIs play the governmental control and play an important role, but it's not enough. As I said in every public statement here in Peru, that one of the best partners for government control is the social control, or the control that comes from the society, and also the private compliance. Private sector plays a key role in the fight against corruption. When we think about the different links of this chain that goes from prevention, sanction, and remediation, there's no doubt that fire only exists when there's oxygen. There's no public corruption if there's no private corruption as well. So there are many things that we need to do internally so we can better link the work that we do together with the private sector. I'm not only talking about how we can report any illegal act and how we need to build trust. We need to have hotlines. I think that we all as AIs have these hotlines. However, we not only treat in the same way the private sector and the individuals. Citizens have a lot of information and they can file reports. However, we need to be aware that they won't have privileged information, for instance, of a company who is taking part of a bidding process and that can provide valuable information almost on real time about what's happening as part of this procurement process. So that's why I believe that we cannot deal in the same way a good report that comes as a result of a mechanism between the private and public sector than when we receive a report from private individuals. So we need to deal with this in a different way, because the public servants who are honest and honest businessmen are those who can reveal the issues and could alert all of us about problems that come out from these public and private partnerships. So I believe that all these great experiences, all these recommendations about how to hire people during an emergency like the one that we've experienced as a result of COVID, everything that has been said here as the report mechanism that Mrs. Valentina presented today, all those presentations are really valuable experiences that we can learn from. Maybe one of the key elements of OLACEFS is exactly fostering the experience exchange so we can learn from each other and we can move forward on the fight against corruption. I'm certain that as a result of the work that OLACEF has been doing, not only with GIZ, but also with Alliance for Integrity, we will be able to move forward in the different technical committees in such a great endeavor. It's not possible to fight against corruption effectively if private sector is not engaged through mechanisms which have been well known and stated in an efficient way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Controller. We also want to voice our thanks to all our attendees. You're all invited to follow us in our social media for the Alliance of Integrity, OLACEFS, and that's where we post lots of information and communications on this topic, which is so important. So stay tuned to learn more about future events. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.